Hello and welcome to Inkwell's weekly craft session with me, Bev. I am here to show you today some more fun Halloween crafts, as promised last week. And I've been making little bats. Now, I've been looking a lot at primitive sort of art, so kind of folky kind of art and other objects and things that have sort of a bit of a weird kind of spooky value to them. So this little guy is what we're going to make, and I have drawn out some templates for you all to print off at home. You will need some light coloured cotton. I am using a sewing machine, but you don't necessarily have to use a sewing machine. You could just use a needle and thread. I did use a needle and thread for the details on the face. You're also going to need some acrylic paint. As I said, you'll need light coloured fabric because you're going to paint it then. And then you're going to work with that acrylic paint then to sort of give you a bit of an aged feel to your lovely little bat. So black acrylic paint, I also used sort of a mucky colour as well, so if you've got some brown and some blue or green hanging around, then that would help you out a lot. And I also used some sandpaper just to sand back to give this sort of aged feel. I also used a little bit of wire to hang this guy with, but you don't have to use wire, you could just use some thread, it's totally up to you. So this little guy is double-sided, and I've had it hung around the house for a few days now because, well, it might not be Halloween yet, but I think I've fallen in love with him a bit. So, without further ado, let's get making. So once you've cut your bits out, you should have 2 bats, and then you'll have 4 wings. You'll need to, on your wings, just mark your lines where you're going to make your seams so that your wing looks like this. So your seam's going to be about 1 centimetre. You're going to go from this side all the way around to this side. Make sure you've cut your nicks in it because that will help it have a good shape here then when you've sewn the pieces together. So remember to leave this hole here open like I've done here. So once you've sewn it together, you need to turn it the right way around. You'll need to lightly stuff it, and then you need to sew the detail then onto the wing. So I've sewn my 2 pieces together, and then I'm just going to turn it the right way. If you're struggling to get the corner bits turned out, I usually use a pen or a pencil or something at this point just to help me ease it. When you're sewing this bat, you don't need to be overly careful with how neat it is or anything like that. The idea behind replicating primitive wares such as these are that they didn't have machines so much back in those days, couldn't afford them. People would have hand sewn themselves, and they wouldn't always have been so skilled in the art either. So this is a nice sort of easy way to start sewing little tezzies and things, I guess. Okay, so I've got that out as much as I can. The stuffing that I'm using today is just some sort of bog standard teddy stuffing that you get. I think originally they wouldn't have had something like this, so they would have used dry herbs and things like that inside these. So go ahead and use those if you want to. Obviously, if you've got some dried herbs in there, they have a tendency to smell fabulous. So, got my stuffing in, and now what I'm going to do is sew on these lines like this has been done. Okie dokie, so once you've got both of your wings sewn together, you'll need to have one piece of the bat's body on the table, or whatever it is that you're leaning on. And you'll need one side of the wing turning inways like this, and the other side again inwards, because what we need to do is to turn this the right way around once we've sewn it all together. Now when you're sewing these together, you need to leave one of these sides here unsewn. And when you're sewing the other side, you need to make sure that you're not grabbing the wings in with it. If you are worried that you're going to end up sewing your wings, that you've not tucked them in enough, just leave the whole of this bottom end and sew it up after you've turned it the right way around. Okay, so you should have something that is looking about like this. And then you need to stuff the middle section of your bat then. You'll need to do this, stuff it quite firmly. Okay, so I've got my stuffing in, and now you want to neatly sew then this last edge. So you'll want to fold in your fabric where you've left your seam allowance on both sides, and then pin that together, and then sew it together with your machine, or if you're hand sewing, do it that way. Again, don't worry about being too neat. We are going to pin over these in a moment, so any little bits of pen that you can still see on your wings or anything else like that that you've marked with, that's all going to get brushed over with the acrylic paint. So now it's time to paint. You need a paintbrush and your acrylic paint, and just go for it, all over the fabric. When the bat that you've painted is dry, you'll need to get hold of some sandpaper, and then the idea with this stage is for you to create a bit of an aged look. So you just want to sand the paint back a bit. Once you're at a point where your bat is sanded a little bit and you've started to get an aged effect, then you want to get hold of your sort of mucky, rusty coloured paint, and you're going to just dab that onto the bat then. I've just got a bit of tissue here, just dabbing that on over the top of the black paint. And then once that paint's dry, you'll want to sort of just go over it a little bit with the sandpaper. So you should have something that looks like this. Bit sort of mucky looking, fairly old looking. And the next stage then is to give your bat a face. So I'm just using a bit of brown thread for my face. I'm going to sew on 2 eyes and a mouth. Of course, you don't have to do this step if you don't want to. You could use buttons for the eyes or other bits of fabric, whatever you can find. When the face details are done, all that's left to do is to attach your wire, and then it's finished. It's ready to hang up. So I hope you've enjoyed that, guys. We will bringing you another Halloween-based craft video next week. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves. Happy back making, and we'll see you soon.